Did you know that over 60,000 people every single year manage to stay in Australia by using loopholes the government rarely talks about? While ordinary applicants wait years, spending thousands of dollars and facing endless paperwork, others are quietly slipping through side doors in the system, and most Australians don't even realise it's happening. Here's the shocking part. Some people arrive on a simple tourist visa, then never leave. Others claim to be students, but the classroom is just their entry ticket. There are even cases where fake relationships and quick marriages have been used as a fast track to residency. Sounds unbelievable, right? But it's happening right now. And the government? They know these cracks exist, but closing them completely isn't as simple as it sounds. That's why today, we're uncovering 10 of the most surprising immigration loopholes in Australia, the ones that can turn the rules upside down. So stick with me till the very end, because some of these will absolutely shock you. And before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. You won't want to miss the eye-opening videos we've got coming next. Number 10. Citizenship by birth technicalities. When most people think about citizenship, they assume it's simple. If you're born in a country, you're automatically a citizen. But in Australia, it's not that straightforward, and this is where a fascinating loophole comes into play. Unlike places such as the United States, where birthright citizenship is automatic, Australia has tighter rules. A child born in Australia doesn't automatically become a citizen unless at least one parent is already an Australian citizen or permanent resident. But here's the twist. If a child lives in Australia for the first 10 years of their life, regardless of their parents' visa status, that child can claim Australian citizenship. Now think about what that means in practice. A family might enter on a temporary visa, overstay, or even live in uncertain legal circumstances. Yet if they remain in Australia long enough for their child to hit that 10-year milestone, suddenly the child has the right to citizenship. And once that child is a citizen, doors begin to open, from education and healthcare to the possibility of sponsoring parents in the future. This loophole has created heated debates. Critics argue it's being exploited, with some families deliberately staying under the radar just to reach the 10-year mark. Supporters, on the other hand, say it provides stability for children who know no other home but Australia. After all, how fair is it to deny a child citizenship in the only country they've ever grown up in? It's a loophole that sits at the crossroads of law, morality, and practicality, one that reveals just how complicated the concept of belonging can really be. Number 9. Visa appeals legal delays. One of the least talked about, yet most powerful loopholes in Australia's immigration system is the appeals process. When someone's visa application is refused or even cancelled, most people assume that's the end of the story. But in reality, it can be the beginning of a much longer journey, one that can stretch out for years. Here's how it works. If a visa is denied, the applicant often has the right to take their case to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, AAT. This tribunal reviews the decision and, while the process unfolds, the individual is usually allowed to remain in Australia legally. Some people take it even further, escalating their case through the federal court system, creating even more delays. Each stage can drag on for months or years, depending on the backlog of cases and the complexity of the arguments. For some, this isn't just a second chance, it's a lifeline. Even if they know their case is weak, the act of appealing can buy them valuable time in the country. During this period, many are able to work, study, or build families and communities, creating ties that make eventual removal far more difficult. Critics argue that this loophole clogs the legal system and is unfair to genuine applicants waiting in long queues. Others see it as a necessary safeguard, ensuring that mistakes or unfair decisions by immigration officers don't ruin lives. But either way, it's undeniable. The appeals and legal delay system has become a strategic tool for those determined to extend their stay in Australia. In fact, some cases have stretched on for a decade or more, leaving people in a strange limbo. Not fully accepted, but not forced to leave either. Number 8. Overstaying without deportation. When people imagine Australia's immigration system, they picture strict border control, tight visa rules, and firm enforcement. But the reality on the ground is far more complicated, and one of the biggest loopholes is simply overstaying a visa. Every year, thousands of people enter Australia legally on tourist visas, student visas, or temporary work permits. But when their visas expire, many don't leave. Instead, they quietly stay on, blending into the community. The surprising part? Not everyone gets deported right away. In fact, recent figures suggest there are tens of thousands of people living in Australia unlawfully at any given time. Why doesn't the government immediately remove them? The truth is, deportation is expensive and time-consuming. Authorities often lack the resources to track down every overstayer, especially when many live low-profile lives, working cash-in-hand jobs or relying on community networks. Some even go unnoticed for years. For overstayers, this loophole can feel like a gamble. On one hand, they risk detention and eventual removal if caught. On the other, each year they remain increases their connections, jobs, relationships, even children, making it harder for authorities to break those ties. In some cases, overstayers eventually find pathways to legal status through partnership visas, asylum claims, or ministerial interventions. Critics argue that this undermines the integrity of the entire immigration system, rewarding those who bend the rules while genuine applicants wait in line. Yet others see it as an unavoidable flaw. No immigration system in the world can police every single person who slips through the cracks. In the end, overstaying without deportation exposes a reality many Australians don't see. A shadow population living in legal limbo, caught between the rules on paper and the realities of enforcement. Number 7. Investor business loopholes. When most people think about migrating to Australia, they picture long queues, piles of paperwork, and strict eligibility tests. But for the wealthy, there's a very different pathway, one that critics say looks more like buying a golden ticket. These are the investor and business visas, and they've created one of the most controversial loopholes in the system. The idea behind these visas is simple: attract entrepreneurs and investors who can contribute to the Australian economy. By investing a set amount of money, sometimes in the millions, applicants can fast-track their way toward residency. On paper, it sounds like a win-win. Australia gets an injection of capital and investors get a place to live. But here's where the loophole comes in. In many cases, the actual economic benefit is questionable. Critics argue that some investments are passive, going into safe, low-risk government bonds rather than creating new businesses or jobs. Others point out that once permanent residency is secured, the investor may not even stay in Australia or contribute long-term. Then there's the issue of unequal access. While ordinary applicants spend years proving skills, English proficiency, and work history, someone with enough money can bypass many of those hurdles. This has sparked debate about whether Australia is prioritising wealth over merit. Even more concerning are cases where these programs have been exploited for money laundering or used by individuals with questionable backgrounds seeking a safe haven. Although there are checks in place, loopholes in enforcement mean that not every case gets the scrutiny it deserves. For some, this pathway represents opportunity and global competitiveness. For others, it's a glaring example of how money can bend the rules of immigration. Either way, the investor and business visa stream has become one of the most talked about backdoors into Australia. Number 6. Asylum seekers, onshore protection. When people hear the word asylum seeker, many imagine boats arriving on Australia's northern shores. But what surprises most is that a significant number of asylum claims actually come from people who entered the country legally on a visa, often as tourists, students, or temporary workers. Once inside Australia, they apply for onshore protection visas, creating one of the system's most debated loopholes. Here's how it works. Someone arrives on a valid visa and, before it expires, lodges a claim that they cannot safely return to their home country. This immediately triggers a lengthy legal process. While their claim is assessed, sometimes over years, they are generally allowed to stay, and in many cases, they gain the right to work, access healthcare, and even receive certain government supports. Critics argue this loophole is open to abuse, with some applicants using asylum claims not out of genuine fear, but simply as a way to extend their stay in Australia. Statistics show that a large portion of claims are eventually rejected, raising questions about how many were genuine to begin with. But on the other hand, human rights advocates stress that the process is essential. Many people face real persecution and only find the courage or opportunity to claim asylum once they've reached Australia safely. Denying that chance could put genuine refugees at risk. This loophole highlights a difficult balancing act, protecting those in genuine danger while preventing the system from being overwhelmed by those seeking to game it. And with rising global instability, asylum claims made inside Australia are only expected to increase, keeping this loophole firmly in the spotlight. Number 5. Work visa exploits. The 457 visa, later replaced by the Temporary Skill Shortage (TSS) visa, was designed to solve a practical problem. Australia needed skilled workers, and these visas allowed employers to bring in talent from overseas. On paper, it's a logical solution. Businesses fill gaps in the labour market, and migrants get a pathway to work in Australia. But in practice, this system has opened the door to widespread exploitation and loopholes. Here's where the cracks appear. Employers are the gatekeepers in this process. They nominate a role as skilled, sponsor a worker, and in return, the worker can live and work in Australia. But some employers have abused the system, inflating job descriptions or nominating roles that aren't truly in demand. There have even been reports of employers creating fake positions just to sponsor workers. For the workers, this can mean being locked into unfair arrangements. Some pay huge fees under the table to secure sponsorship, only to end up in low-paid jobs that barely resemble the skilled roles they were promised. Others feel pressured to stay silent about exploitation, fearing that losing their job will also mean losing their visa. Meanwhile, critics argue this loophole doesn't just harm workers, it can also undercut local Australians, with some businesses preferring sponsored employees who are easier to control than local staff demanding fair wages. Although reforms have tightened some rules, loopholes remain. Employers can still manipulate the system, and oversight isn't always strong enough to catch every case. For many migrants, the 457 or TSS visa remains a tempting backdoor into Australia, one that, despite its risks, offers the promise of eventually transitioning to permanent residency. This loophole shows how easily a system designed to solve shortages can be twisted into an opportunity for exploitation and shortcuts. Number 4. Tourist to work conversions. At first glance, a tourist visa seems straightforward. It's meant for short visits, sightseeing, family reunions, maybe a few weeks in the sun. But in reality, this simple visa has become the entry point for one of the most unexpected loopholes in Australia's immigration system: the conversion from tourist to work or other long-term visas. Here's how it happens. Someone arrives in Australia on a tourist visa, often with the stated purpose of visiting, but once inside the country, they apply to switch their visa status, perhaps to a student visa, a partner visa, or even a protection visa. While that new application is processed, they are usually allowed to stay legally, sometimes for months or even years, depending on the backlog. For many, this loophole is a deliberate strategy. Instead of applying offshore and facing long waits or stricter scrutiny, they enter as a tourist first, then change their story once they're onshore. It's a move that buys time and increases their chances of staying, since Australian authorities are often more cautious about removing people already inside the country. Critics say this tactic clogs the immigration system and blurs the purpose of tourist visas, turning what was meant for short-term visits into a backdoor migration pathway. Airlines and immigration officers are supposed to detect suspicious cases before entry, but with thousands arriving every week, it's impossible to catch them all. Supporters, however, argue that people should have the right to reassess their future once they've experienced life in Australia. After all, some who enter as tourists genuinely discover opportunities to study, work, or build families. This loophole reveals just how flexible the system can be, and how something as simple as a holiday visa can become the first step toward a permanent new life. Number 3. Regional work schemes. Australia has long struggled with a problem. While big cities like Sydney and Melbourne attract plenty of workers, many regional and rural areas face serious labour shortages. To fix this, the government introduced regional work schemes, offering migrants an easier pathway to permanent residency if they agree to live and work outside the major cities. On paper, it's a win-win. Regional towns get workers, and migrants get a faster route to stay. But over time, these schemes have opened up a loophole that some migrants use to their advantage. The rules often require evidence of regional work, such as farm labour, hospitality jobs, or other community-based roles. Yet enforcement can be patchy. Some people manage to provide false or exaggerated evidence of their regional employment, while others do the bare minimum just to tick the box. There are also cases where migrants move temporarily to regional areas, only to shift back to major cities once their residency is secured. This undermines the very purpose of the scheme, boosting struggling rural economies. Employers in regional areas have also been accused of exploiting the system, offering low-paid or harsh working conditions to desperate migrants who see the work as a stepping stone to permanent residency. Critics argue that these loopholes not only exploit workers, but also fail the communities the scheme was meant to support. At the same time, supporters believe the system offers vital opportunities for migrants willing to contribute in areas where Australians often avoid working. Ultimately, regional work schemes highlight the tension between policy and practice. While designed to spread population and opportunity across the country, Loopholes and weak enforcement often mean the benefits don't fully reach the regions that need them most. Number 2, marriage partner visas. Love knows no borders, or at least that's the idea behind Australia's marriage and partner visa system. It's designed to keep couples together, allowing Australians to sponsor their foreign partners to live in the country. On the surface, it's a compassionate policy, recognising that genuine relationships shouldn't be torn apart by immigration rules. But behind the romance lies one of the most frequently exploited loopholes in the system. Here's how it works. If someone can prove they are in a genuine relationship with an Australian citizen or permanent resident, they can apply for a partner visa. Evidence usually includes joint bank accounts, shared rental agreements, photos, and statements from friends or family. But because genuine relationship is such a subjective concept, it leaves room for manipulation. Over the years, authorities have uncovered countless cases of sham marriages and fake relationships set up purely to secure residency. Some involve financial transactions, where an Australian is paid thousands of dollars to pose as a partner. Others are more subtle, with couples exaggerating the seriousness of a short-term relationship to meet the criteria. Even when authorities suspect fraud, proving it can be extremely difficult. After all, who decides what real love looks like? Investigators have to tread carefully to avoid breaking privacy laws or wrongly accusing genuine couples. Meanwhile, migration agents and lawyers sometimes coach applicants on how to present their relationships in the most convincing way possible. Critics say this loophole undermines the fairness of the immigration system, giving an edge to those willing to bend the truth. Supporters counter that most partner visas are legitimate and that punishing everyone for a minority of abuses would be cruel. This loophole reveals a tricky reality. When immigration rules try to regulate something as personal as love, the line between genuine and fraudulent becomes incredibly blurred. Number 1, student visas as a backdoor. For decades, Australia has been a top destination for international students, with its universities and colleges attracting hundreds of thousands each year. The student visa was meant to support education and cultural exchange, but over time, it has quietly become one of the most common backdoors to permanent residency. Here's how it works. A student applies for a visa to study in Australia, often choosing courses that don't necessarily match their career goals, but allow them to enter the country. Once there, many find ways to extend their stay, enrolling in low-cost or short-term courses just to renew their visa. In some cases, students move from one course to another, staying in Australia for years without progressing toward a meaningful qualification. The real appeal of the student visa lies in what comes after. Completing certain qualifications makes applicants eligible for a post-study work visa, which can then become a stepping stone to skilled migration pathways or even permanent residency. For some, the classroom is less about education and more about securing a foothold in the country. Critics argue this loophole has created a booming industry of ghost colleges. Institutions that exist mainly to enroll international students who are more interested in visas than in learning. Employers also benefit, as student visas allow limited work rights, creating a pool of cheap, flexible labour. On the flip side, supporters say international students contribute billions of dollars to the economy and enrich Australian society. But the line between genuine study and using education as a migration strategy has become increasingly blurred. This loophole shows how a visa intended for learning has evolved into a widely used pathway for people whose ultimate goal isn't just a degree, it's permanent residency in Australia. So there you have it. 10 powerful loopholes that show just how complex, messy, and sometimes unfair Australia's immigration system can be. From student visas used as stepping stones to marriages questioned for their authenticity, these stories remind us that behind every visa is a human being, chasing opportunity, stability, or simply a better life. But uncovering these truths isn't easy. It takes hours of research, cross-checking facts, and carefully piecing together information that most people never get to see. Making videos like this is challenging, but I do it because these are stories that matter, stories that deserve to be told. If you've watched this far, it means you care about understanding the bigger picture, and that's why I need your support. Please, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. It might seem small, but for me, it makes all the difference. It gives me the motivation to keep digging deeper, to keep creating content that exposes hidden realities and gives you knowledge you won't find anywhere else. So hit that subscribe button right now and join me on this journey. Together, we'll keep uncovering the stories the world doesn't always want you to know.